Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Pledge Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to unmatched value and unwavering support for our customers and the community at large. Today, we have a new friend of Upkeep, a veteran, one of my buddies. I was introduced to him by Matthew Knuth, a fellow ambassador of Upkeep. We have John Livingston, who's 21-year naval veteran on submariners, or a submariner on submarines, doing all types of maintenance. He is currently the functional training program manager at McKinstry Service. And McKinstry has been around 60 years, and they are one of the leading companies in building design and systems that do not harm the environment. We couldn't be happier to have you, John. Welcome to the Upkeep Pledge Pros podcast.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for having me. It's great to be here for sure.
You're very welcome. I'm so glad that Matt was able to connect us. He does that a lot with me. He'll be out meeting customers and talking to people. Like, hey, you got to talk to this guy. And when he tells me that there's a kindred veteran who's all about the reality of maintenance, or reality about training and our industry, I gotta snatch you up. And you and I, we spoke like the day almost that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so so this episode, we're going to be talking about submariner maintenance and my world of flight deck maintenance. Now, we're both in the Navy. We've both done the maths. We've both turned the wrenches. We both led the teams. But there's kind of a difference between me running around like a crazy person on the flight deck in 130-degree heat and you being underwater for 9 months turning
Absolutely.
wrenches. So before we get into all that, John, could you please let us know ultimately who you are, a little bit of your history, and a little bit about McKinstry, and then a little bit about your naval experience?
Yeah, sure thing. So like you said, you're 21 years in the Navy, a submarine force. A lot of that, I was a submarine torpedoman, so weapon systems mechanic. Worked a
Nice.
lot on hydraulics, air systems, seawater systems, and a little bit of electronic stuff here and there. But I was a frontline worker. Turning wrenches, um, fixing valves,
My
troubleshooting
favorite people.
systems. Yeah. So that made up a bulk of my career. And then I enjoyed teaching people, how to do that when new sailors would come to the command. I enjoyed it so much that I made a career of teaching out of it. So I was a Navy instructor for 6 years. That was split up between tours, but yeah, teaching people how to perform maintenance effectively, how to troubleshoot effectively. That was kind of my bread and butter in the military. So I really enjoyed that. And a lot of that informed my decision to come to McKinstry afterwards. It just lined up where McKinstry was looking to fill a need that they had to train their staff how to functionally operate in their roles and progress in their careers. So it's been a huge, rewarding endeavor for me to be able to use the skills that I got in the Navy, play off the electromechanical troubleshooting and maintenance experience that I had, and be able to teach that and continue to teach that with McKinstry.
That's so awesome. And, like you and I were talking about, you and I had met a few weeks ago. We had a talk and we just were, just chopping it up. And what you had to say about McKinstry and their methodology of going about and training and overseeing and working with their labor force, which is union, and really, committing to excellence with, all the things that they do. And it wasn't shocking at all when you said that the functional side of training is so paramount. And in the Navy, and I know, it doesn't matter if you're talking. We want to be with people who are doing and can show us how to do and apply things that actually matter. And before you and I jumped on here, I kind of was bothering you a bit about the word functional in your title. And I was like, hey, is this BS or is this like the real deal? And it's so good and so refreshing to hear that that's a step that McKinstry has taken to ensure that the people who are training their service, their frontline workers, is somebody who understands the application and the function of training, which is not just, hey, read this packet. Okay, you've been trained. See you
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
Can you speak to that functional, like the bridge of military and coming to McKinstry, and that how function and application of knowledge is really paramount?
Yeah, sure. like you said, McKinstry identified that need within the company across all of its lines of business, not just service, but major construction and, all of our energy and technical services folks as well. Think facilities conditions assessments and existing building commissioning and things like that, right? If you come into the company in a role, let's say you're doing this one specific thing as a commissioning engineer, how does what I do impact the next person down the road? If I'm doing a facilities condition assessment and I provide that information to the client, am I just done with that client, or do I pass that off to another department in the business who can capitalize on that relationship and move that client relationship forward? So it's a huge focus for us to be able to manage that knowledge base and manage those interactions between internally between lines of business and our customer as well. And I think you'll probably agree, right? When we're talking about managing relationships, that was 90% of how things got done in the Navy. It was what you know, but also who you know as well, and how you can leverage those relationships to get the outcome that you need.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's immensely valuable. I remember distinctly, I was a bit of a hardhead in the Navy to a point because I was so into doing the work and hands-on, and I ran the flight deck 18 hours a day, troubleshooting machines during flight ops. And when people would come to me in my department or outside the department who'd never done my job or turn their wrenches and try to tell me something, I would look at them and be like, don't talk to me. Like, you have no clue what
Yeah,
I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. I don't care what your rank is. I wasn't disrespectful, but in my mind, I'm like, okay, you just did the I chief, yes, chief, or,
right.
whatever. And kind of
Yeah,
moved on.
no,
Um,
absolutely.
but the first thing I want to ask you is, could you give us, a high level with maybe with a little bit of detail on like what a day on a submarine is like from your function from the maintenance that you perform? Because I mean, look, submarines are a black hole. Not very many, most people have never even been inside of one. When I was on the aircraft carrier, there was a tender that was next to our
Mhm.
was a sub tender on one side, and I would see it come up and it would be there, and I would see people get off, but it was the only place that had like three guys with ARs standing in front of the the P-way, and so no one ever got a chance to see what it was.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I wish you could have gone, and I highly recommend you do if you ever find a museum ship. But yeah, maintenance on a submarine, I think is you could probably equate it to anything on the flight deck, right? Broken up into work centers. Um, the work centers are a little bit more broad. I think on aircraft carriers, you guys are really specific. Like you do one thing, like a pump guy, and that's about it. Um, Whereas for my work center, uh, with torpedo division, right, we touched everything from small arms to seawater systems to the anchor to all that stuff. And it was definitely a chore, right? You had your subject matter experts in various things, but everybody had to be well rounded in order to meet the demands and accomplish the maintenance for that day or that cycle. So kind of a day in the life was really what you would expect. 6 to 8 hours of watch, 3 to 4 hours of maintenance, and then hopefully you get some sleep and some exercise, maybe. Um, but yeah, it was definitely, and also you have to consider the operational aspect too, right? If the submarine's out to sea doing missions, right, I'm not going to be letting the anchor go. So a lot of forethought and planning needs to go into that as well when you're setting up a maintenance cycle. And will I be able to do this when it comes time? When my CMMS is telling me to do it, or do I have to defer it or do it earlier? Based off of operational commitments. So yeah, when you think about running a CMMS, you got to ratchet that up to like 1,000 and really do a lot of planning ahead. Um, and yeah, it was fun for sure.
Can't imagine, we use the same, probably a very similar system, the maintenance action form system. I forget what the Navy called it, honestly. It was 10 years ago. But to think that just the sheer fact or the sheer um, doing of maintenance on a submarine could give away your position somewhere in the ocean, right? So, like when you're talking about the having to plan way ahead of time and
Mhm.
um, and all these things, like it makes me think about how most businesses in our world now, they don't have a very strong symbiosis with operations,
Mhm.
with planning, with scheduling, right? But in the military, there was no other way,
Nope.
right? If you're on a sub and you're going on a deployment and you have very planned out strategic milestones of that workup or that operation or whatever, and doing maintenance, I mean, military is everything with maintenance. So it's
Yeah.
like creating that symbiosis between all the departments on the ship, and that submarine was paramount, because like I said, I don't know anything about being on a submarine, but I do know that doing maintenance underwater has acoustic signatures, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
so can you tell us a little bit about how um like the communication and the structure of your planning and scheduling was just second to none, essentially?
Sure. Yeah, and I think it all started, obviously, you're a junior sailor, you're pretty much just operating off the schedule, right? Chief says, I got to do this. This is what I'm doing today, and be done, right? It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You do your one thing, and then you go on to the next. As a divisional chief, when I was running my own division on the USS Santa Fe, that's when you really start getting into that, right, that foreshadowing aspect of maintenance and what's coming down the line and what are we doing 6 months from now. Um, Working with all of the other divisional chiefs on the ship and trying to deconflict. If my mechanic chief is taking down our hydraulic system, I'm not going to be able to do my maintenance, so I need to figure that piece out. If we're going to be operating in a certain area of the world, I can't, like you said, make any acoustic noise while we're on mission, so I need to figure that piece out. And then later on in my career, I was actually stationed as the 3MC on the Ohio, so I was in charge of all preventative maintenance on the ship.
That's a
And
big
then
deal, man.
yeah, so
That's a big deal.
it was thank you. It was a challenge for sure to be able to coordinate internal maintenance as well as all the external stuff with the submarine tender you mentioned, with any intermediate maintenance activities on the shore side. It was it was a dance for sure, but one that I really enjoyed.
Crazy. So you said intermediate maintenance. So I was in AIMD, Aviation Intermediate Maintenance Department. So,
Mm,
and then above me was depot level, which is
mhm,
where, I actually was part of managing depot level repairs as well. So when we would go into port for 3 months, we would offload all of our equipment, support equipment that I worked on underway.
yep,
We'd send it to Atsugi, Japan. And then that was a depot level repair facility, but I was also the petty officer there.
mm,
So like I would actually have a crew every every 9 months, or every 9 months we'd be on deployment for 9 months. We come in for three months, so we'd be in Atsugi doing rework, and that was for a depot level repair. So I was able to get my guys to do a lot of depot level repairs, so that we were benefiting from that knowledge when we
oh
went
yeah.
out to sea. So are you saying that on the sub you guys were not intermediate?
We were not. We were organizational only.
Really?
Um, Sailors would rotate between shore duties. Some would go to IMA and learn how the more in depth maintenance, corrective maintenance practices and things like that. But yeah, when you're attached to the submarine, it's all organizational level maintenance. Yeah,
Wow, I did not know that. I
pretty
don't
crazy.
even know I don't know what the organizational level maintenance was in my department, to be honest with you. Maybe that's bad, but I honestly don't. Because I mean, like I said, I there was a hangar bay. The shop was in the hangar bay,
Hmm.
and a lot of any major work was going on down in the hangar bay because it was out of the way, right?
Right.
But on the flight deck, my entire job was troubleshoot and run and gun.
Hmm.
Machine's down. Either you fix it, or you get it out of the way, or you send it downstairs to be fixed and swap it out with something else.
Right.
But on a sub, you can't really do that.
No.
And I've spoken to other submariners, not as in depth that we are, but briefly, and they say that the systems are relatively simple, and there is a level of redundancy, right? But
Yes.
the fact that things are so simple reduces the variability and reduces the need for specialized knowledge or equipment to maintain them. Would you agree with that?
To an extent, I would say. I think simple is relative. When you're talking
Sure,
about
sure,
submarines, right? Those are some of the most complex machines on
sure.
the planet. But the organizational level maintenance, right? You're talking about greasing, you're talking about alignments, you're talking cleaning and specs, right? All that type of stuff. Um, and then when you get into intermediate level maintenance, you're talking, let me replace a bearing, let me replace I don't know, a motor. And then depot is, dry dock. Like we're going
Okay.
in for months. But yes, like you mentioned, a lot of redundancy built in. If something does go down, usually there's a backup. I would say 90% of the time, and then it's a run and gun to get the other thing fixed so that you maintain that redundancy in that system. Yeah.
How do you, I'm sure you keep very, very strategic spare parts on board,
Mhm.
very strategic, because you don't have any space for anything else.
Right.
Um, so let me ask you this, like for us on the flight deck or in AIMD, if there was a part that we didn't have, and like I'll give you an instance. I was working on the crash and salvage crane, which is the crane we call it Tilly. It's a crane on the aircraft carrier that if an aircraft crashes, this machine will pick the aircraft up to get it out of the way and right, and they can do what they need to do with it.
Mhm.
Well, there's taglines on this machine, and they're PLC controlled, and they run off contactors.
Mhm.
Well, I had troubleshot down to a contactor on a tagline, and Tilly is such a critical machine that flight ops you're not allowed to have flight ops without that machine fully operational. And it's like a sign off from like the admiral or the CO. Someone's going to correct me, but it's one of the two has to sign off to do flight ops if that machine's not working.
Yeah.
Um, so when we needed that contactor, our ship stores didn't have it. I mean, they had that contactor on board in like 18 hours. It was crazy. So my question for you is, you're 3,000, 6,000, 30,000 feet underwater and you need a part. What does that look like that you don't have?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like you said, a lot of critical spares are kept on board. A lot of critical parts when you're thinking about circuit boards or things like that are definitely kept on board. But in the event that we don't have it, again, we're not far from a place where we can do a BSP, which is essentially pulling up alongside of a small boat and doing stores transfers for food and things like that. And parts are a huge part of that, right? So with the redundancy that's built into the systems, like usually we're running on the backup. We'll come in, get that part, whatever that critical spare is, get it fixed, um, and then swapped out and move on with our day. But I would say maybe 7 to 8 times out of 10, we have what we need on board. But in the event that we don't, it's costly, but we can get it.
Yeah. And to me, it seemed like whenever we needed something, there was no expense spared. And I'm
Oh no,
sure that
absolutely
this
not.
the
Yeah.
same for you as
Oh
well.
yeah, for sure.
I've actually we used to do vert reps. We would do refueling at sea, replenishments at sea, um, and that when people yes, I was on a nuclear aircraft carrier, but we carried 1 million+ gallons of JP5 for jets. That's what I mean by refueling. No, we weren't
Mhm.
recoring a reactor at sea, but
Yeah.
so I don't know if you said, but I didn't catch what type of submarine were you on? What like fast attack or what was it?
I've served on both actually. So I
Okay.
started my career on Trident submarines. I was on the USS Tennessee for my first boat where I qualified. Then I did fast boats for a couple tours on Louisville and Santa Fe, and then finished up my tour on the USS Ohio, which is SSGN. So a BN that converted to carry conventional ordnance instead of the nuclear missiles.
Right. That's wild. Do you have your dolphins?
I do. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I got them tattooed.
Nice. Nice. You remind me of all the BMs that I served with that had the bosun's mate
There you go.
tattoo on their hand right here.
Yeah, the anchors. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, I'm just very intrigued by this, man. It's it's something you don't hear a lot about. And
Yeah, for sure.
so another thing, and I like to bring this up. So when I had did a podcast with CMMS Radio. If you don't follow them, please do. I mean, Greg Christensen and them is amazing. We have a lot of the same friends, and we talk some real stuff on there. So
Mhm.
on Veterans Day last year, it was myself and a guy named Howard Penrose, who is the motor doc. You need no explanation; he's the man. But we were talking about how criticality and the need for sound corrective maintenance and troubleshooting is so paramount, and how there's a big difference on the grand scheme of the grand scale of things where your manufacturing line stopped for 20 minutes and
Yeah.
a submariner's oxygen refining system or something stops for 20 minutes, right? I'm making stuff up. I don't know if that's a thing or not. But,
You're
but
close. You're close.
yeah, close. Yeah, I'll let you explain that.
Sure.
But and him and I were very passionate in saying that like there's literal lives on the line. There's literal, uh, it could go on, right? When something is not working the way that it should from a military naval perspective, and how when people like you and I transition to the civilian world and we naturally understand the criticality, the critical thinking, like how do we get around things? How do we make things work until we can do something else? I'm going to get this thing up as
Right.
soon as I can. I'm not letting anything get in my way. Um, how that really stands out in the
Yeah.
civilian world. And I'm just curious to hear, like, with your maintenance and your corrective work and anything that pops up on a submarine, like, I would think anything that comes up is probably a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll use the example that you said, oxygen refining, right? So I think everybody knows, and I'm going to be careful and not to disclose anything that you can't find on YouTube, but
Sure.
oxygen on a submarine is made from seawater, right?
Did
Seawater
not know that. That's
Yep,
wild.
yep. So seawater gets distilled. There's a process called electrolysis that, we're talking like physics now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Electrolysis splits some atoms. We collect some of the atoms and then pump the others overboard, and then we got oxygen, right? Um,
Crazy.
yeah, if that goes down, huge deal. Probably going back home if we can't fix it out to sea. And then, like I said, there's redundancies built in. There's things that we can do. There's backup plans to a backup plan. But yeah, lives are on the line. The mission is on the line. Importantly, but um, important enough that taxpayers are paying us out there to do a job.
Hmm.
The mission has come down, and that's what we need to do. And if we can't do that, then that's a big deal. So being able to accurately evaluate the health of your system before you leave, I think is huge. We put a lot of time and effort into maintaining those systems throughout the deployment cycle, and then when we're on a mission, hopefully everything goes okay, and we're not having to replace critical parts and operate with one of the two or one of the four systems down, depending on what you're talking about. But yeah, it's definitely night and day in the civilian workforce. But I think a lot of veterans carry that mindset over, to your point, right? I sure do, and it gets noticed by my team as well. They're like, "Man, this thing isn't due for 3 weeks. Why are you all spun up on this?" Like, well, it needs to get fixed, so let's fix it now. Like, why
That's
wait
right.
3 weeks? So
I'm the exact same way. When I was managing several maintenance departments for host terminals, all waterfront, lots of heavy equipment, lots of shipboarding equipment, continuous barge unloaders, stacker reclaimers, bucket wheel excavator. I mean, everything you can think of. Um, my thought process was always, yeah, I have a backlog. I understand criticality. I'm building out my backlog with all the things that I need to do. But if I
mhm,
know something is important and it needs to be done, well, that's why we have a backlog. That's why we have
exactly.
criticality. That's why we go about the way that we do when we plan and schedule work. And I would be in the shops, just fooling around with maintenance managers that work for me and all this stuff. And they'd be like, "Yeah, we're gonna." I'd be like, "Hey, what's going on with this thing?" They'd be like, "Oh, we're gonna get." I'd be like, "Why are you gonna get to it? Why it's in here? Why don't we just do it now? You
Right.
already have it. You've already taken it from the operation and you have it. It's better to say, hey, I need to keep it an hour longer or a day longer than to give it back and say, I need it again in 2 days.
Absolutely.
You know?
No, that's a great point, and I think you know as as I get more familiar with the business and I start working with all of our tradespeople in the local unions up here in Washington, I think a lot of that same mindset exists. The military and the trades are born of the same cloth.
Yes.
A lot of different a lot of different backgrounds, but still come together under the same values, under the same work ethic, under the same mentality and approach to work. So I found a lot of kindred spirits. When I speak to the people, the wonderful people that make up our trade partners here in Washington. I think it's great to be able to foster those relationships as well.
No doubt. They're out there doing the work every single day. They are seeing the reality of your business unfold. They're seeing the reality of the relationships, the reality of the infrastructure that you build, design, and maintain. And there's arguably no better source to get the pulse of how the business is actually operating from that standpoint than them.
Absolutely.
and in the military, it's no different. I was a flight deck I was the flight deck troubleshooter day shift supervisor. So I had one other guy. It was just four troubleshooters. So people don't understand there's 6,000 people on a ship. There's only four flight deck troubleshooters. Arguably, there's no other smaller group that maintains more stuff than we do. So it was me and one other guy on day shift, and then a night shift, two people.
Mhm.
Often we always overlapped because you know how the Navy is.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, but you
Who can do
know,
it for it's way better.
yeah, yeah. And there was always the understanding that we're not going to leave something for night shift to deal with, right? It was either we're going to do it, we're going to stay over and do it together, or vice versa. They're going to come on early and we're going to get this thing knocked out, because we would have days where it was 24 hours a day flying.
Mhm.
And um, there was rarely times when flight ops would be interrupted other than like crazy weather or something, right? I mean, it was
Right.
very rare because pilots have to maintain their carrier qualifications. And I don't know how long that interim is, but it doesn't take long for them to lose their qual, essentially.
Right.
Now,
Right. Rightly so, I think.
yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, on the submarine, when you do, I'm assuming you guys do workups like sea trials and stuff before you go. Okay. Um, so when you're doing shakedowns and stuff like that, there must be a heavy, heavy focus on ensuring operational stability and context on all your systems.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about the different submarine platforms. Fast attacks, I think, kind of experience this more than the others. But pre a palm workup or pre overseas movement, right? Getting ready for deployment is really where all the focus kind of goes into. Is your crew trained and qualified? Are they proficient? Um, are your systems what does your maintenance backlog look like when you talk about backlogs, right? What's
Yeah.
been deferred? What systems are degraded? So there's a huge focus on that. Going back to what I said earlier, right? You don't want to get out on a mission and find out that something's broken, right? So
Yeah.
every system's put through its paces, everything is tested. The maintenance planners on shore side look at all that data and then say, yes, you're good to go, or hey, we need to focus on this before you leave. But it's all hands on deck for sure to get that boat ready to go to sea on time for its deployment.
Yeah. I remember for us, man, being forward deployed, we were out to sea all the time. Literally 9 months out of every year we were on the water.
Yep.
Um, and I remember just the sheer amount, it was like a mountain to climb to prepare for a deployment. The different one of the differences between my world of maintenance in the Navy and yours is like I had a lot of resources to pull from.
Mm-hmm.
You don't. Well, I mean, I know you do, but like in my circumstance, if a P-25 firefighting truck breaks down on the flight deck
Mm-hmm.
and I can't fix it up there in a reasonable time, well, we just tow it over to the elevator, take it to the hangar bay, and then we get a new one in 5 minutes.
Right.
For you, it's like if some desalination unit breaks, I'm sure you have more than one, but like there isn't, you can't like just be like, all right, let me just put a new one in here.
Right.
You know what
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean?
Walk down the street and buy a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think especially in the Navy, and I'm sure the other branches suffer this as well. The work is so specialized, the maintenance is so specialized that um, a lot of time and effort is put into training those maintainers and training those sailors to keep that equipment running. Because, like you said, you can't just pull over at the gas station and get a quart of oil if you need it. You know, a lot of work goes into keeping those systems running. While we're on deployment, while we're doing mission, while just regular underways. And I think it's kind of a lot of things that don't really click in the average person's mind when they think about it. We're running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when we're underway. It doesn't stop. So
Nope.
you have to squeeze that stuff in when you can get it. Um,
Yes.
um, in order to keep that platform running and doing the nation's work.
Yeah. And one thing that I've taken from a maintenance management standpoint and an efficiency standpoint that I've really taken and from the Navy and leveraged in my professional career is what I like to call opportunistic maintenance, opportunistic work. And it's really work. that you assume on your backlog or something that you're not going to be able to fool with, or you're going to have to defer it. But these little moments in the operation pop up where you've created good communication, good relationships in your departments, and something pops up and you're like, oh shit, I can go do that maintenance today. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
takes, now I'm kind of segueing into something else now, but it takes the uh the culture, right? It takes the things that us as sailors and veterans, like we build these unique relationships with each other, right? We're always in close quarters. We're always away from family. We're always having emotional things going on. We're always having all these things that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
And we lean on our fellow sailors, right? And confide in them. And you build and you forge these really unique relationships.
Yeah.
And those relationships that you build, they build a competitive advantage for us to do our job. And I say this all the time. I have friends that I grew up with that I've known for 30 years. And I have friends that I was in the Navy with that I've only known now for 16 years.
Hmm.
And some of them I have a closer bond with
Yeah.
because of this mutual
Suffering,
experience.
suffering, mutual suffering. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and that opportunistic mindset is so valuable in our world of industry, in any industry. But it's like, how can I achieve, gain insight, complete, learn, educate in the swirl of what is happening in my day or my life, right?
Yeah.
And you just got to keep working at it. And I remember being on the flight deck and then being like, all right, flight ops is ending at 10 tonight. And I'll be like, okay, I'm staying up because I'm going to go
Mhm.
do A, B, C, and D so that when I come on day shift, these things are done, right? And I
Yeah.
can just knock them out. And sometimes that happens. And then sometimes the flight deck officer or the handler will be like, pass, psych, we're going all night.
Right. 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 Yeah. No, that's a great point that you bring up, and I think being able to seize that opportunity, by having a holistic understanding of whatever it is you do in life, being the best at what you do to understand that process holistically and understand where you can plug and play opportunities, whether it's for maintenance or anything else. That was a big part of running a division, right? Everything's changing constantly on the fly,
Yeah,
right? One day you're
crazy.
going to be going to do this, but hey, 5 hours later, the plan's changed. So really becoming the subject matter expert in your field with your department. I spent a lot of time understanding the holistic view of McKinstry Service. What does our sales development team do? What does our business contracts team do? And how do those people interplay with each other? If contracts doesn't get a form correct, how is that going to affect our technicians down the line? And that's really what functional training is about: is teaching individuals cause and effect, how do they
Oh yeah.
complement each other, where are those opportunities where they can help, and bringing the team together instead of being siloed in individual roles, right? Bring the team together to accomplish McKinstry's mission, right? Which is build a thriving planet.
Yeah, it's crazy. That I couldn't have said it better. I mean, it's just it is just a wild thing to think about. I mean, anybody who knows a veteran who's worked in a highly stressful, highly expertise driven world recognizes that in them. Um, and yeah, that's just the best. It's the coolest thing ever. But before we end, we got like a
Sure.
couple minutes. I wanted to ask you one more thing. So when I was on the carrier, again, I spent my entire time in the Navy on an aircraft carrier, so I don't
Mhm.
I don't know anything else. Um, so cross training was super huge on a carrier, but a carrier has 6,000 people and there's
Yeah.
like 300 different rates on the ship. So if I don't know how to be a haul tech, there's a whole department of haul techs that know how to be haul techs.
Yeah.
Do I know how to shore and watertight integrity and all? Yeah, I have to learn all those things. Being a flight deck troubleshooter, I had to learn aircraft firefighting. Most people on the ship don't go through aircraft firefighting, right? So I had to do all these things that were cross trained in case the guy who mans this is dead.
Yep.
Now I have to step in and do this thing, or vice versa, all these things. I can't imagine, and you can help me, the cross training you have to do on a submarine. I mean, you probably have to damn near know everything everybody else knows.
Yeah, I would say maybe a good 75 to 80%. You bring up a great point, especially things like DC and firefighting, right? Damage control. Um, I taught that stuff when I was teaching out in Pearl Harbor at Nasty Pack. I taught submarine sailors how to fight fires and how to fix pipe leaks.
Yep.
Everybody knows how to do that stuff. But you're absolutely correct. Smaller platforms like think about your LCSs, your small boys, destroyers. There's a lot of cross training. And, the submarine qualification itself, earning your dolphins is kind of a testament to that. Where historically, ever since submarines back in the early 1900s came about, everybody had to know everybody else's job. Like you said, just in case that man or woman goes down, um, you need to be able to pick up the slack, or that submarine's not coming home. Um, so it's do I know how to be a sonar tech and evaluate contacts in the water? No, but I know how the system works, and I could probably see a ping and pass it off to somebody who does know how to do it.
Right.
Or I'm not even going to talk about nuclear reactors. That's just magic in a bottle to me. But
Yeah,
uh,
it's magic.
but do I know a little bit about it? Yeah, of course I do. So yeah, the culture is definitely there, and I think that's somebody will probably say in the comments, the army doesn't, the army isn't all that way, or the Marine Corps, but I think the military in general is that way, right? If your battle buddy goes down, you're going to pick up his, you're going to pick up where he left off and finish the objective. So
Yeah, I mean, it, on a sub, submarines just make me nervous, right? I mean, I can't imagine just the sheer stress of having to know that there is a potential at any point for you to have to pick up and be some weird rate that you don't really fool with that often, right?
right.
For me, if we did aircraft firefighting all the time, like I went to school for aircraft firefighting, I did aircraft firefighting training on the flight deck. We'd always have it. Like I would, if an aircraft fire happened, I would feel comfortable fighting an aircraft fire.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm down below waterline in the reactor space or something and the hull springs a leak, I know how to shore and I know how to pipe patch. But it doesn't mean that I'm gonna do it the best way and
Right,
be
right,
totally in my mindset doing
right.
it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between submarines and surface craft. You have damage controlmen, right? You have subject matter experts in that one field. Submarines, everybody's a damage controlman, right? We
Right.
don't have that specific rate on board, just due to the crew limitations. So everybody goes to the training, right? Everybody understands how important that is, and is able to support each other. God forbid the need arise.
So wild. It's so wild, man. John, I'm so glad that we were able to become friends and start our new relationship, man. And
Likewise,
we
brother.
all
Likewise.
we owe it to Matt. If you guys don't know Matt Knuth over at SPM Instrumentation, he's a wonderful, wonderful wealth of knowledge. Awesome guy. He's an upcamp ambassador. He's fighting the good fight out there, talking the reality of condition monitoring. And it's an ode to McKinstry for leveraging SPM and their expertise. It's just awesome. And I said when we met, John, I was like, I don't think I've ever heard of McKinstry. And then when you and I talked, you were like, they do this, this, this. I'm like, holy crap! How have I not heard of McKinstry?
Right? It's the biggest construction company that you never heard of for sure. But getting bigger every day. A lot of technical service stuff, a lot of consulting for energy savings, and everything's coming down about climate change. Right, McKinstry's at the forefront of those opportunities. Across the country. So great company to work for. Couldn't be happier.
And they've made very wise choices in putting people like you and veterans in strategic positions to better facilitate their business, to drive their business forward. And it's immensely valuable. I'm willing to bet that customers or companies that listen to this that have veterans in very strategic positions in their business will agree that they think differently. It's a different thought process. And now I'm not going
Absolutely.
to say every veteran is going to be an ace for you because we served, and I'm sure you did. I served with many people that were just there for a paycheck and they wanted to get out and not be an expert in their craft.
Right.
But there's a lot that did. And I'm not taking
Absolutely.
anything away from those people. They still wrote a blank check to the United States government up to including their life, and I respect that. But there is calibers within
Absolutely. Yeah.
within there. But John, again, I'm so glad, man. Upkeep is so happy to have you. We're so thankful for your service. We're glad that McKinstry is fighting the good fight and doing the right things. And I'll give you the last word, John. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely, and likewise, thank you for your service, and it's always great to meet a fellow brother. And um, getting a hold of me is quite easy. John Lee, JOHNLI at McKinstry.com. If you want to get a hold of me, you can reach out. We can talk training. We can talk, you know, union relations. We can talk anything along those lines. Union stuff might be a little sketchy. I'm still diving into the deep into that pool, but happy to sit down and have a beer or a coffee over Zoom or anything like that, and just chew the fat for sure. Thanks
Right
for
on,
having
man.
me.
Dude, you're very, very welcome. I'm so glad. Thank you very much, John. This has been the Pledge Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to unmatched value and unwavering support for Upkeep's customers and the community at large. This has been John from McKinstry. John, thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you. Have a great one, Brian.
Thanks, John. See you, man.